RT is sitting down with award-winning editorial columnist and cartoonist Ted Roll. Ted, thank you so much for meeting up with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Let's get right into it. Right now, you're on a tour for your new book, which is called The Anti-American Manifesto. Clearly, that name is bound to tick off some of the political establishment here in the U.S. For our viewers, give them a little bit of a sneak peek into the main message of what it's all about.
It's a call to arms. It is addressing the fact that neither the Democrats nor the Republicans are able or willing to address the biggest problems facing the United States today, which are the economy, the environment, healthcare, and the wars. And now you have to ask yourself as an American, do you want to tolerate this system? Do you want to tolerate a system that is unresponsive and not going to go anywhere? Or do you want to change it? The Anti-American Manifesto is not anti-American, it's anti-the American government, or more specifically, this American government. We can do better, and that's what I want to do.
Now, you're a big critic of America's wars and occupations, both in Iraq and Afghanistan. A call to arms really seems like, an aggressive way to respond to the aggression that the U.S. government is involved in.
The reason I oppose this particular regime is because it is so aggressively violent. As the rest of the world knows, the United States is always involved in some kind of war of aggression. It rarely spends an entire year without invading some foreign country. And that's only part of the story. I mean, there's the overall economic system that the United States presides over that is incredibly violent and unjust. So I'm talking about taking on this monolith, this violent, horrible, disgusting system that is brutal and is willing to do anything. You're going up against them. You can't fight these guys with one arm tied behind your back. You're probably going to lose anyway, but you have to be serious.
Let me follow up on that. We have the United States really liking to criticize other countries and really try to get involved one way or another. How come, if all the things that you say are true, we're not hearing more voices of criticism from across the globe?
Well, anti-Americanism is rampant throughout the world, obviously, and not just in the Muslim world. And much of it is justified, unfortunately, due to U.S. foreign policy. In terms of other countries, let's face it, if you're the president of a random republic somewhere in Central Asia, for instance, are you really going to challenge or criticize the United States government, which is the sole remaining hyperpower in the world, the largest exporter of arms, and possesses a bigger military presence than the next 10 countries combined? No, I don't think so. Everyone's afraid of us because we're a bunch of bullies.
Would you say that U.S. military presence across the world is basically the #1 priority of American foreign policy?
Well, it's certainly the #1 priority of U.S. federal spending. 54% of U.S. federal tax dollars go into the military. 19% is just paying off the interest on old wars that are over and we're not fighting anymore. So what the United States is all about is about invading other countries and exerting foreign military power, whether it's through military bases, of which nobody even knows how many there are. If you call the Pentagon, they can't tell you if it's 700, 800, 900, or 1,000 bases. They don't know how many people they have under arms. Somewhere between 2 and 3.5 million, directly or indirectly, using mercenaries. I mean, it's a crazy, monolithic, Roman-style empire, and nobody talks about it, including anywhere in the world or here. It's not allowed.
I want to bring up a quote from your book. The U.S. military would not and could not have killed 1 million+ Iraqis if the people who live in the United States had done anything they could to stop them. Do you really think that's the case? What could the people have done? Considering the fact that many Americans were opposing and still are opposing these wars and still nothing is being done.
For the most part, the American left has been dormant or non-existent since the early 1970s. And the big exception was the opposition to the war against Iraq in 2003. Hundreds of thousands of Americans marched in the streets. There was vocal opposition. Even members of Congress were against it. And yet, in the end, nothing changed. And you have to ask yourself, what could have gone differently? I mean, let's say the 1 million+ Americans who marched in the streets during the winter of 2002 to 2003 had been more aggressive. Let's say they had refused to go home. Let's say they had clashed with the police. Let's say violence had broken out. I think that then Congress would have been forced to take pause because they knew that this was an unjustified war of aggression. It was an optional war. It wasn't about defending American interests. It wasn't about protecting the United States, and therefore it didn't necessarily have to happen.
You say in your book that the story of the United States is drawing to a close, and you call the U.S. a zombie empire. And especially in the light of the recent elections, when we see Republicans again enjoying their power, it really feels like a circle. Republicans, Democrats. Where will that change come from that you talk about?
Well, it's certainly not going to come within the existing system. What we're seeing now that you just referred to, this flip-flopping, the two parties are so close together on the overall ideological framework from left to right that there's not enough differentiation. So big swaths of the population don't feel represented at all, which is why our voter turnout is among the lowest in the industrialized world. The change is not going to come from the D's and the R's, the Democrats and the Republicans, and the fact that people are constantly just voting against the party in power is a symptom of that. People are frustrated. The message they're sending is not, right now, we support the Republicans, nor was it in 2008, we support the Democrats. The message is, we hate them both, so we're voting no. The story of the United States government as the 20th century invading, bullying, imperialistic, economic and political empire, that is coming to a close. It is unhealthy for us, and it's obviously terrible for the world.
Now, you also claim that it's very likely that the United States could become a fascist state. And this is clearly a statement that is bound to get many people outraged. Where do you see these traits?
Well, I don't think that we're going to see, brown shirts and Nazis goose-stepping in the streets, but we have elements of proto-fascism in American culture today. Whether you look at the vague nature of the politics of the Tea Party, where political vagueness and a lack of ideological specificity is a trait of extreme right-wing politics. The cultural basis of so many Americans, particularly in the middle of the country and in the South, is centered around extreme forms of right-wing Christian fundamentalism. And that religious force is very nativist, racist, bigoted, xenophobic, and anti-feminist, anti-gay. It's very narrow-minded. All of these attributes, not to mention the major attribute of being so militaristic, are elements that we saw in traditional fascism in Germany and Italy, where there's civilian rule. The military is not worshipped. We don't have all this rhetoric about the heroes have fallen, another fallen hero. This is not to say that we should disrespect the military, but Americans have, especially since 9/11, have come to fetishize the military.
You get a lot of criticism, especially from channels like Fox News. They say you're not a patriot because you are against this widespread military presence of the United States. Are you not a patriot?
I am more of a patriot than those people ever will be. I care about the American people more than I care about the American government. The American government is supposed to be here to serve the American people, and because of its leading role in the world, also the people of the world. We have a tremendous responsibility because of our political and economic power, and we are just completely acting irresponsibly and insanely.
Now, I want to ask you, one of the latest articles of yours is called "Obama Was Bad from the Start." Realistically, which of his promises has he kept in these last 2 years?
Has he kept? Well, that should be a short answer. Well, he did promise to escalate the war against Afghanistan, and he has. He did try for health care, sort of, but health care reform turned out to be really creating a system that's even worse than what we have now. He hasn't kept many promises. I mean, he promised he would close Guantanamo, that he would end torture, that he would end extraordinary renditions, that he would ramp down and pull out of Iraq. All he did was rename the troops who were in Iraq from combat troops to something else, assistance forces. He's a very cynical guy.
I want to ask you about following up on Afghanistan. Do you think it could become the graveyard of the U.S. as an empire, like many people are predicting, since there's not really an end in sight? We know the Pentagon has come up with 2014 as the timeline, but not a deadline. What does that mean? Decades more?
I thought 2011 was supposed to be the deadline, and now it's 2014, and who knows how long this goes on. I mean, there are so many threats to America's continued status in the world that it's hard to know exactly what will bring it to an end. All we know is that it's unsustainable. It's kind of, the United States is kind of like a wild man who uses drugs and drinks and commits crimes and beats people up, and everyone hates him. All you know is he's going to come to a bad end. You really can't be sure how, but something bad is going to happen.
No, you've cited the enormous amounts of money that is being spent on the military and U.S. defense. If there's so much money available, how come it's not being spent to create jobs for millions of jobless people? And why do we continue hearing that the country's in a recovery?
Yeah, it's really crazy. If you took the $1.4 trillion that were initially spent just to bail out the banks, and you had redistributed that money among all the millions of Americans who were having problems paying their mortgages and who had just lost their jobs in the previous year or two. I remember doing the math and back of the envelope determining that each one would receive a check for $350,000. The reason is because the U.S. government does not serve the people, and it's not afraid of the people, and even though it knows that its actions are short-sighted and will ultimately lead to its demise, they cannot help themselves. They cannot stop themselves.
Ted Rall, thank you very much for your time with us.
Thank you.